I would also like to explain how birth control works, which will make you understand why you might be experiencing the loss of libido and increase in water retention. So most of contraceptive pills and other hormonal birth control work in the way that they prevent ovulation. So this also means that you don't have a real cycle. The bleeding that you experience when and if you pause the pill, for example, for 7 days to bleed, it's not a real period. So you're just shedding the first layer of uterine lining, but it's only because the progesterone is dropping when you're on your pill break. And your progesterone levels stay consistently high while you're taking the pill. So it's the hormone that we were talking about that's a bit more sedative and can also decrease our sex drive. Same goes for water retention.
Welcome back to Biohacking Eve, Health Optimization for Women with Judith Mueller, where we shine a light on everything that will help you reach your best self as a woman, as unique and individual as only you can be. Live long and prosper, my friend. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're talking to Hermone. Hermone is a German Femtech startup, and its holistic app for the female hormone cycle provides easy to understand information about the 4 phases of the cycle, the hormones involved, and most importantly, how to deal with and prevent symptoms. With their product, the founders want to help close the gender health gap and improve the quality of life of menstruators and women by empowering female body literacy. Today we have Philippa Zorn, who is the CEO and co-founder of Hermone. Welcome, Philippa.
Hi, nice to be here. Thank you so much for the lovely intro.
Super. My first question, and I noticed that you guys at Hermone are quite particular on that, is could you define the terms female, women, and menstruators for me as you understand them?
Yeah, this is a common question, but also a very tricky topic because, of course, we always assume it's only women who menstruate. Women have a female hormone cycle, but we also have non-binary folks, trans folks who not defining themselves as women, but are still menstruating because they have and unfortunately we don't have a better term for this, female hormone cycle. There's a bit of debate on how to call this, but this is why we want to use inclusive language around this. So that's why we say women and menstruators.
That makes sense. Thanks for that. Could you tell us a bit more about Hermone, how the app works?
Yeah, so we developed an app for the hormone cycle, as you already said, of women and menstruators, and it offers everything that you need to finally gain in-depth knowledge of your cycle. Our biggest kind of thing that we're always talking about is that we want to help it make your cycle work for you and no longer against you. So where we differentiate ourselves in terms of other period trackers, for example, is that just like you might be already used to, you can track all your symptoms, log your period, and get a very accurate reading and prediction of your individual cycle and ovulation, menstruation, and so on. But just like with the other trackers that you might know, but we don't stop there. So that's the difference. We put an emphasis on also your emotional needs just as much as your physical ones. And we want to help you to understand the correlation between your cycle phases, your symptoms, and what you can do to alleviate and improve the unwanted symptoms that you might be experiencing. And as a company as a whole, we're also really excited and proud to offer our expertise through workshops and masterclasses for companies who are wanting to help their female menstruating staff make the most of their well-being, productivity in the workplace.
Good stuff. And how did you come about the idea of Hormone?
Yeah, that's a good question with a bit of a longer answer. And yeah, so my co-founder, Philippa Zorn, researched the menopause for another project, and she stumbled upon terms like cycle phases and hormone levels. And at first she felt rather lost as she had no idea what any of that meant. Also, a quick side note, I think this might be interesting for your audience particularly, is that men, for example, start to get into the topic of longevity and biohacking around their 40th birthday. And for women, this is a little bit different. We're more occupied with other topics like child rearing and then menopause at this stage. So it takes us a bit longer. Yeah, anyway, so there was a lot of feeling of embarrassment from her side because she was so unaware of these terms. And she felt, how's this possible? I'm a grown woman, I'm a mother of two, and I have such limited knowledge of my own cycle. And then, to her surprise, but also maybe a little bit of a relief moment, was that her close friends also shared this lack of understanding. And everyone only knew the very basics, the minimum, and sometimes even had false information. And then eventually she approached me and wanted to find out what I knew about the cycle. And yeah, I was a little bit more familiar with these terms and also the first one to be able to answer any of the questions that she had. So she shared that she couldn't believe the lack of knowledge that we all have in this area. And it was very clear that she was determined to change this in some way. I, on the other hand, had accumulated my knowledge because I was struggling with several aspects of my cycle beforehand relating to an autoimmune disease, but also not responding well to standard hormonal contraceptives like the pill or similar. So I had to start a bit of a deep dive in order to just understand my cycle and how it relates to my psoriasis and other aspects of my well-being. But I had also found that it was very difficult to find information that kind of connected the dots for me.
So you've touched on women having limited knowledge on what's actually going on with their body. So tell us a little bit about what are the things that people know, what are the things that people don't know, or what are the things that people think they know but actually don't really know or know wrongly.
The thing that we always end up with realizing that with the 3 key facts that the average person learns about their cycle, we always say is we menstruate, we can get pregnant if we want to, and symptoms like pain, fatigue, mood swings, everything like that throughout our cycle are normal. This is something that's being reiterated to us a lot, that that's just part of being a woman or menstruator. And this is something that is very wrong because symptoms are not something we should be ignoring because they're our body's way to make us pay attention to an issue. And, you know, just like we wouldn't necessarily ignore a toothache because, you know, we seek help from a medical professional to alleviate this, we also need to give the same sort of attention to cycle symptoms, which affect us negatively. Just to give you an overview, because symptoms are a very abstract term, but I think the study that we love to refer to the most is one that shows that 90% of menstruators regularly experience various symptoms throughout their cycle. So we're not just talking during your menstruation, but throughout the entirety of your cycle. Symptoms they wish to alleviate. Obviously, there are also positive symptoms that come with the female hormone cycle, but especially the ones that we all wish to alleviate, most of us are clueless on how to do this. This does not only compromise our general well-being, but it can also hamper our personal growth. I think that this statistic is really unbelievable. If we think about it in the bigger term, that 50% of the world's population is experiencing this every month and 400 times during our lives, which is the average number of cycle that a woman experiences. And then we're being told that it's normal to have these symptoms instead of receiving help for it.
So tell us a bit about body literacy and what that means.
Yeah, so this is a term that we think is really important. Body literacy is the term for the ability to understand our body and its symptoms and having the awareness that it needs attention. So in the realm of health discussions, women and menstruators often find themselves underrepresented, encountering the issue of substantial gender health and data gaps. And this discrepancy is also apparent in areas like, again, relating to you, longevity and biohacking, where the narratives has predominantly been centered around male bodies. So the consequence of this oversight extends far beyond just the representation of us as females, but for instance, also the practices such as intermittent fasting, which is a staple in many biohacking regimens, doesn't really align well with the unique hormonal fluctuations and metabolic needs of female bodies. And a lot of research findings and health practices hailed as breakthroughs, often based on studies that are primarily conducted on male subjects. So the gender disparity doesn't not only skewed in terms of understanding of health, but it also poses then significant risk to women's well-being. So the first step towards changing this and embracing that our bodies are different in comparison to men's is that we have other needs because of it can be found in gaining body literacy. And because it is so important to understand this and the term and its meaning of it, I'm just trying to paint you a picture of how you can think about it is if you imagine lacking body literacy, it's like driving a broken car, which makes loud noises and has smoke coming out of it. It's the motor. But because you don't understand what this means, you're not taking it straight to the nearest mechanic like you should, but you keep driving because you are unable or unwilling to recognize what is happening. And then you keep driving until something really even worse happens. So the car breaks down completely, for example. And this is what we mean by body literacy. You're finally gaining the understanding to take the steps to further improve your well-being.
It's really about seeing and noticing what's going on, really seeing where is your baseline, what are the fluctuations from that baseline. So let's do a really quick 2-minute recap of whatever it is, 10th grade biology. Tell us about the cycle, because then I really want to deep dive into cycle awareness. What does each of these different phases mean? How can you use that to your advantage, basically?
Yes, they're really important. Yeah, so the average length of a cycle is 28 days. If your cycle is a week shorter or a week longer, there's nothing to worry about. It's just as normal, because also the length and course of your cycle can change throughout your life due to a variety of factors such as age, stress, obviously pregnancy, and also in connection with illness. So we have 4 cycle phases, and the cycle begins with the menstrual phase and the start of your period. In the second phase, the follicular phase, the follicles grow in your ovaries and your body prepares for ovulation. The third phase, the ovulation phase, as the name reveals, ovulation takes place, and they're also the days when you're most likely to become pregnant. And the fourth and final phase of the cycle is the luteal phase. This phase is dreaded by many of us because of the increased physical and emotional symptoms that many of us experience. Our cycle is mainly governed by 4 hormones. We have estrogen, which dominates the first half of your cycle, so the menstrual and follicular phase. And then we have FSH and LH, that's the abbreviation for follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, which stimulate the growth of the ovum or egg cell, and they trigger ovulation. And then we have progesterone, which dominates the second half of the cycle, the luteal phase. And as well as playing an important role in ruling the cycle, these 4 hormones can also affect your emotional well-being, energy levels, and other physical symptoms. And yeah, so I'm sure we want to move on to the nitty-gritty, but just to give a tiny bit of a disclaimer here before we put all these basics into context and give further insight, I would also like to mention that serious health problems can occur in relation to your cycle. So, for example, if you have PMDD, endometriosis, PCOS, These are all medical issues that require qualified treatment and the help of a trained medical professional. So when I speak about increased well-being, I speak about alleviating cycle symptoms which are not related to other specific health conditions.
Thank you for that. So let's have a, as you said, deep dive into the nitty-gritty.
Even if your cycle is regular, so knowing which part of your cycle you're currently in gives you a way to understand your physical and emotional experience and connection to your cycle. And this gives you the ability to consider symptoms within the context of what is happening hormonally. And this is what we call cycle awareness. For your menstrual phase, the first day of your period is also, as I already mentioned, the first day of your new cycle. And on average, the period lasts about 5 days. Again, a couple days more or less is fine. The uterus contracts and the uterine lining is shed as period blood leaving your body through your vagina. And for many of us, this leads to abdominal pain or pain in the lower back and the legs.
Question for you, Ashley. The sort of abdominal pain and back pain, I can understand that's the region that we're talking about. But why the legs? Is that due to water retention or?
And this is something that I'm probably going to say a lot when I try to answer these questions. The problem is often that this area is still so under-researched that we can never know for certain. And this is a problem for everything related to female bodies, whether it's regarding the hormone cycle or other diseases we might incur. What I can tell you without feeling like I'm giving away false information again is that it's related to something that we call prostaglandins, which is the hormone that helps the uterus contract. And this contracting can, for some people, spread all the way into your legs. So that's why you might feel that pain that going all the way down there. But that also, again, very individual. Not everyone is experiencing that.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes, the follicular phase, the second phase of your cycle, happens a few days or right after the period. So a few days into your cycle, estrogen production starts in the ovaries, and with that, the follicular phase begins. Estrogen is also known as the happy hormone because it can lift our mood. It makes us feel really good. It gives us lots of energy. And at the same time, estrogen is also responsible for glowing skin, physical features that we generally describe as feminine. So in this phase, you can expect good mood, energy, creativity, increased concentration, and generally just a desire to be out in the world and be with friends, or very talkative, so to speak. The ovulation phase takes place on average between day 13 and 18 of the cycle. So the egg gets released from one of your ovaries and then it travels to your uterus through the fallopian tubes. And during ovulation, estrogen and testosterone, they join forces and they give you even more energy. So for many of us, this gives us like an extra confidence boost. We might feel especially sexy and good about ourselves. And you're probably going to feel like Superwoman and you want to be everywhere and do everything at once. It's obviously the perfect time to push ahead with important projects and plan, but you will thank yourself later if you take care not to overdo it. Use your energy wisely and also plan for the phase that's about to come, which is the luteal phase. During the luteal phase, the last phase of your cycle, the happy hormone estrogen takes a plunge while the calming progesterone rises. So some of us notice this shift quite strongly right after ovulation and might feel less energetic straight away. But for others, it might just be a slower tapering of our energy until we reach the very end of this phase. Yeah, luteal phase usually shows up between day 19 and 28 of the cycle, and it's also the longest part of the cycle. While progesterone can have a calming effect in the days just before the period starts, many of us also experience what we call PMS, the premenstrual syndrome. And this can cause a range of physical symptoms such as headaches, breakouts, cravings. You may feel more irritable than usual, less focused, and more introverted. So we need to remember not to be too critical with ourselves or others. Be extra kind to yourself. Overall, you might find that your mood might not be as great. And then I hear this from a lot of people. So as soon as the period starts, everyone goes, oh, okay, it was that. I was just about to start my period. And I think it's so important to know where you are in your cycle. So you're, especially in this phase, so you don't keep wondering what is wrong or blame yourself for feeling like this month after month.
And I've had this, I'm guilty as charged, really. I've had this into my early 30s. I'm like, by now I really should know, right? It's not that surprising. And it really helped me pay attention. I think also because I used to be on hormonal contraception, many of us in Germany, you just get put on it by the time you're 12, 15, something like that. And you spend a good 10, 15 years not really knowing what a cycle is. So when I then switched to non-hormonal contraception, I was like, oh shit, so this is what PMS is, and this is all the stuff they've been talking about, which I honestly just never believed. This was super bad. And then from there, it took me a year or two to really learn what that felt like, and then to start paying attention now much more. Now I'm full circle in the sense that now I'm actually planning things around it. So if I've got an important presentation, or I'm going on stage, or I've got a photo shoot, which, by the way, I hate guts. Sometimes you have to do them. And I will plan a photo shoot literally around ovulation, because I know it's going to make such a difference in not only how I physically look, vanity bit, but just the energy I've got, just how I come across, basically. It makes a huge difference. And I've also learned in terms of cycle syncing to really use, if I can, obviously with work commitment, it's not always possible, but to really like to be slower, to do a lot less networking events, and just stay home and actually spend time reading, learning, reviewing the things I've been doing. So really actually use the cyclicality that is imposed on me, let's call it, by biology, to actually use that to really leverage up. So I can use that time to prepare for the next sort of bout of boundless energy, of being basically this rubber ball that just bounces back and forth, because I know then I will have that energy, but it's going to last a week or two. And then I know I get time. My body's forcing me to recover, to take that time, both mentally and physically. So I've actually really learned to harness that. And before it was like, it's just something that happens. I think now that I'm a bit more in tune with it. And again, it's not always possible, right? You just do whatever you can, do whatever's possible. But when I really manage to hitch onto these cycles, it's amazing. It really is a complete game changer.
I think that's so inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing that, because I feel like that is exactly where we want everyone to be that also uses our app. That realization that it brings so many positive effects with it. And obviously we talk a lot about symptoms right here, but you were just describing all these incredible effects that really listening to your body and being in sync with your cycle can bring, when that you're going to feel confident and better about yourself, even though you're doing something like a photo shoot that you might not be enjoying, but you'll feel good about yourself, so it'll be fine. And then also already knowing that, in the week after this or in 2 weeks time, I might not have as much energy, but I'm not going to push myself to do these things unless you have to. We know we all have these moments where we have to, but like, also just having that awareness of being like, it's not my fault. This is just a very normal thing to go through. And I think it's so important that we open up the communication around this as well, to just teach each other, give each other the ability to say this. Oh no, this week doesn't work well for me because I might be right at the end of my cycle and I will not feel great. Can we reschedule? Can we do this at a better point in time?
And this is so crucial. This is really taking it one step further, but the number of female entrepreneurs that I've come across who literally said, look, my VA, my PA, my team, even my entire team, male, female, whatever, anything, they can see when I'm cycling. They know that when to book me for sales calls, when to put me on stage, or when to just lock me away for 3 days. And I think that's next level.
Yeah, that is advanced.
So we've got something to aspire to.
Absolutely. I agree. I love that. I love that the whole team goes, yep, no, we're not going to do that.
Like, just avoid her for 3 days. It's okay. Just the thing, right? When you, and I've seen this with sort of fellow investors where they're saying, okay, at this time in my cycle, don't show me the deck. I'm going to say no to the investment. Show it to me a week later. And then
Oh
I'm
my God,
actually like,
that's so
I can see
interesting.
the idea now. If you knew that, especially as a woman fundraising, you need to know when you should be out talking to people fundraising. But again, you're not going to necessarily know when the other side is more receptive or not. But it is such an interesting pattern to watch, actually. Anyway, so how can we
Absolutely.
use our newfound knowledge, newfound awareness of the cycle to increase our well-being?
Let's get into it. I think it's also really interesting because whereas biohacking, when we talk about increasing well-being, biohacking like takes on the role of more self-optimization for men, for example, quest to enhance performance and so on. It's often more centered around different aspects for women. So for women, it's not just about optimization, it's about addressing symptoms and enhancing overall well-being. And this is exactly what we can do by gaining body literacy, cycle thinking, and also just tracking our cycles in general. Unlike the linear approach that we often associate with male-oriented biohacking, cycle thinking embraces the cyclical nature of women's bodies, everything that we just talked about. So recognizing what our needs are and experiences and evolving over time with these needs. So by shifting the focus from just optimization, we want to go onto holistic well-being. Cycle thinking offers exactly this for women and also a more personalized and sustainable approach that aligns with the intricacies of our physiology. Yeah, so how does this work? When we want to increase our well-being, as I previously explained, each of the 4 phases of our cycle have a set of emotional and physical signals. So when you tune into them, it gives context to patterns of why you experience body confidence, physical fitness, being, cravings, moods, and so on. And as we said, most of us are unable to live a life that's 100% in tune with our cycle. So it's about bringing awareness to those times where life doesn't really sync up with the phase that we're in. So, for example, when we have a busy day at work right before menstruation, we should make sure to get a decent sleep the night before. Definitely don't skip meals. So that way you can make most of your energy without being thrown off by exhaustion and low blood sugar. Why this is so important? Again, a little bit of a statistic from a study here. There's a study that shows that the annual average productivity loss, and I'm not meaning like missed days at work, but just productivity loss, is 8.9 days for menstruating employees due to symptoms and issues they experience during their whole menstrual cycle. And this is because they keep working, although they're not feeling 100%, because that's what we all do, isn't it? So very severe symptoms, as I said, can lead to additional days of absence from work, really strong period pains and so on and so forth. But yeah, why do I mention this? Because this can also reduce our chances to reach our full potential or even lead to earlier retirement when we hit menopause and struggle with that. So yeah, it puts a financial strain on our lives. So it's really important to look into this in a time where we can still manage these issues instead of letting it get to the point where it completely floors us, as in the analogy, until the car breaks down, so to speak.
This is actually super interesting because there's a concept of a biological tax on women. So basically the fact that we are, for our children, we are the primary caregiver because that's just how biology works, but we also tend to be in charge of elderly care, in charge of sick care. So that basically means we lose either productivity or could literally be absence from work or just not being able to participate in the workforce. But I think this is actually a really crucial aspect that even if you don't have that, if you don't have children to look after, you have sick relatives, elderly relatives, this is something that actually affects a lot of us. If we say 8.9 days on average, for some it might be 3, for some it might be 20 or even more than that.
Yeah.
So I think this is definitely something to bear in mind there.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. Yes. What does this all mean when we gain body literacy and have cycle awareness? we can sit in the nice car instead of the broken one I mentioned earlier. Something that runs smoothly, gets serviced regularly, gets taken care of according to its needs. And yeah, we make sure to feel as good as we can. We make room for the phases in which we might struggle, but we also make the most of the others. Yeah, I guess we've already learned a lot, or we've already spoken about a lot, but I think your listeners might be able to take in a bit more, especially regarding lifestyle factors.
And it's, I think, two things are lifestyle factors. That's the stuff we can really influence. Obviously, being aware of where we are in a cycle and trying to accommodate that. But actually, what does that look like in practice? And the one thing that I keep reiterating, so I'm building longevity clinics myself. I'm seeing a lot of other people building longevity clinics. I'm seeing a lot of protocols out there. But I'm always thinking, look, there's no point sticking yourself into a hyperbaric oxygen chamber 5 times a week unless you're doing the basics. If you don't do your eat, move, sleep, relax, being social, finding your tribe. Again, so let's cover these things because I think they're absolutely the basics before we go any further.
Yeah, I totally agree. And as you said, say basics, it might sound so basic, but it is the baseline, it's the pillar to actually feeling good. So it's so important that we don't ignore these basics, so to speak. I want to start off with sleep. We've all heard it a million times. We all know it. It's hard to actually get the 7 to 9 hours of sleep, but it's super important. And it may feel like a difficulty, but let me just reiterate why it is so important. So there's a recent study again that's showing that women menstruators need more sleep than men. Generally, I love this. I think it's so important. Women's brains are more active. That's why we generally need 20 more minutes of sleep.
What do you mean by active? Does that mean in the certain, as in they generally more active during the day, or I'm guessing during the night?
No, this is during the day. We have so many more, let's call it tabs open at the same time. We manage things from a whole different perspective. We're always on the ball with the bigger picture, and therefore our brain needs more energy to see all this.
The multitasking argument, basically.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's where we get the additional, on average, 20 minutes that we need. But now, again, a much newer study, I think it's from this year or late last year, it was found that especially at the end of the luteal phase, right before our period, but also during the menstrual phase, we have a lot more interrupted sleep because of the hormonal fluctuation. So, we might not get the same amount of rest. So we therefore need more sleep to be fully rested. So yeah, 8 to 9 hours should be the norm for us. And then even more right before or while we're on our period due to these sleep interruptions.
And when we're saying 8, 9, even potentially 10 hours, does that mean time in bed or time actually asleep?
Because of the sleep interruptions, it's probably not going to be that in total, but having
his time in bed studies counting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't think there was anything about the exact minutes, but having that extra bit of rest really helps, I would say. Yeah, maybe just one more thing about why it's so important, just to put it into context of hormones and everything. So sleep improves your insulin sensitivity, and it also regulates the release of the LH, estrogen, and progesterone. So that's why it relates so much to your cycle, not just about exhaustion, but it actually is part of having a healthy hormonal balance.
So this is actually crucial for someone who's trying to get pregnant, for example. Sleep is super important. And if you're stressing about getting pregnant, you're probably not getting the sleep. And it's not a great cycle, basically. So we're back on the cycle topic. Anyway, let's have a look at stress, actually, while we're at it.
Yeah, so yeah, you just mentioned it. That sounds very stressful. Stress also, unfortunately, has a huge impact, like it has on so many other things regarding our body. So for one thing, it directly affects our hypothalamus, the brain's hormone command center. And stress leads to a reduced pituitary signaling, which leads to fewer ovulatory cycles. Avoiding stress is obviously easier said than done, but how we can maybe start with reducing stress is to have more clear boundaries, and just the understanding of saying no to something or someone opens up just saying yes to important things like taking care of ourselves.
And stress, again, is not just, whatever work or otherwise is putting on you. It could be emotional stress. It could be overtraining, physical stress. It could be intermittent fasting if you do it too far. That's actually physiological stress as well. So there are very many different types of stress, and you might not even feel stressed. But if you do a blood count, basically, if you do some blood work, your body will tell you, yes, I am stressed.
I was just sitting here nodding. Nobody could see it, but I was like, yes, absolutely. Yeah, there are so many different types of stress. So I think it's also important to start paying attention to how this stress actually articulates itself for you, because it's hard to, we can't always have a blood lab close by to figure out whether we're actually stressed or not. So what are the different indicators for you in these different areas of your life that show you this? And this is body literacy once again.
And it's as simple as, do you find your shoulders hunched? Do you find yourself holding your breath when you think about something, when you think about a task of work, when you think about this person you need to call that you really don't want to call, whatever it might be? So I think sometimes it's actually more, there's some basic quote unquote tools that we can use that I think we're disregarding a lot. And we're always looking for the magic pill. Give me the gadget that will tell me. It's like sometimes the big gadget is your body. Start listening to that.
It is, absolutely. And it's, on one hand, isn't it great that we just need to listen to ourselves, but also isn't it terrible that we can't just get something to do it for us? So we really have to take charge ourselves. Yeah.
Cool. Nutrition. Let's have a look at that.
Yes, that's the number one cause of hormonal imbalances, actually. Yeah, so everything from period problems, fertility issues, usually has its root in the lack of the right nutrition in our diets. What we need: protein, complex carbohydrate, healthy fats, fiber. All of this are the foundation for optimal hormonal health. Fats and cholesterol are important for your period because they are the building blocks for estrogen and progesterone. So certain types of fat, such as medium chain or omega-3 fatty acids, they're found in coconut oil and fish. They're really important for you, and they also have the additional benefit of being anti-inflammatory. Why am I mentioning this? Because that actually reduces, for example, period pain. Protein is made up of chains of amino acids. So your body needs 20 different amino acids, but only produces 11 of them itself. So the remaining 9 are called essential amino acids because you can't make them. You need to include in the diet. So foods that have all of these 9 essential amino acids are called complete proteins. So animal proteins such as meat, poultry, fish, eggs, milk, cheese, yogurt, so on. They're all complete proteins. And then we have that in plant-based diet in, for example, lentils, quinoa, soy. Our suggestion is to start adding all of these things to your diet. Leafy green veggies, protein, healthy fats that we just mentioned. And then, because this can be really daunting, changing your diet or improving your diet. So start adding these things and then try to work on removing the not so good stuff like processed foods and sugar. And the key is really to feel energized and happy and strong and healthy after food, which is a sign of good blood sugar levels. That's why we're feeling good, because we've been eating the right thing. Yeah, it's also important to eat regularly, so at least 3 meals a day. If you're prone to low blood sugar, even more often. Also, a little bit of a disclaimer for all the diabetics. Obviously, I'm not giving advice on eating habits that might be different for you. You obviously have to attend to your needs accordingly. And very interesting fact also, I met another female founder recently from the startup GlucoFit. They're a glucose monitoring device for diabetics. And she actually shared with me that they were seeing higher insulin needs in women or menstruators during the luteal phase. I thought that was fascinating because this is not something that, widely known or spoken about in that community. Yeah. And as you might have already found out, and as you might have already realized when I was saying eating at least 3 meals per day, intermittent fasting is not really recommended for the female system and cycle. So it might cause changes in estrogen levels and negatively affect reproductive functions such as menstrual regularity, fertility, pregnancy, and lactation. The issue with this, or with fasting too hard, I might say, is that the body thinks that we're starving. And I know you already touched up on this earlier. And what this does, it prevents ovulation because our body is trying to prevent a pregnancy in a precarious situation where we're malnourished, basically. And this then causes hormonal imbalances. So when we're looking at intermittent fasting, we have two factors that affect women and menstruators. So it's the intensity, but we also have the timing during our cycle. So generally, again, if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, trying to conceive, just don't do it. That's not recommended. But if you want to do it, if you want to try it for yourself, avoid fasting the week before your period because that's when your body is most vulnerable to stress, and estrogen also drops during this time, which leads to a higher cortisol levels and cortisol sensitivity. And also avoid fasting during or before ovulation, so you don't disrupt the hormone levels and ovulation because of a lack of nutrition. So also start slow, more like 12-hour windows, and you can work your way up to 16-hour windows. But the very essential part is that you don't skip any of the meals and you eat all the nutrition that you actually need. And there are a multitude of symptoms that if you encounter them while intermittent fasting, you should definitely consider stopping. And these can be changes in your cycle, including skipped period, moodiness, irritability, hot flashes, headache, low sex drive, but also things like dry skin, hair loss, breakouts, and trouble sleeping and heart palpitations. And part of nutrition obviously is also supplements, because as I already mentioned, not everything can be produced by our bodies ourselves. It's really important to make sure that we ingest enough micronutrients such as iron and zinc and magnesium. Magnesium, if we had to suggest any supplements at all, that's the star of the show for us. It's often used to treat PMS symptoms thanks to its anti-inflammatory effects, but it's also very calming to the nervous system, and it really has a profound effect on our periods because it plays a part in more than 300 enzyme reactions in the body.
Which type of magnesium do you recommend? Because there's a few of them. How would you dose it?
Yes, high quality, but also if you find a magnesium that combines, for example, 9 different kinds in one. I'm really bad at remembering the exact names of them, but don't look into organic or natural alternatives for this supplement that have a string of the different magnesium types instead of just getting the one that you can get in the supermarket. You want a high dose of it, and it's usually best to take it twice a day because the body can't really absorb too much of it at the same time. That's also really important.
And I think a couple more things on magnesium. Ideally, don't get them from the supermarkets because they will have a lot of fillers. If you're getting a mix, I think getting a mix in general is a good idea. Just be careful of the composition, because in the mixtures, they tend to have magnesium oxide as the highest composition because that's the cheapest one. Unfortunately, that's also the least bioavailable one. I usually look for a sort of citrate, bisglycinate, etc. And yeah, just avoid the filler space. I actually, rather than capsules, because you would need a lot of capsules, I actually just take them as a powder. And I have to say, in my kitchen, every time I refill my powders, it looks like a meth lab because most of my supplements are some sort of white powder spread around the kitchen. Yeah, some side effect for that one. Anyway, let's have a little exercise.
Very good side note. Just one more thing, zinc. Zinc is also really important. And there's a new study out there that's actually showing that it reduces period cramps if you take it regularly. So yeah, that's also a good one to look out for. Yeah. Exercise. During the menstrual phase, don't train too hard. Don't push yourself too hard because, as I said, this is the time when your body is most vulnerable. But you don't have to stop exercising altogether. You can do moderate movement, such as gentle yoga, Pilates, taking walks. Just don't push yourself too hard because it's probably not going to serve you in the long run. It's not going to actually help you. Produce more stress, higher cortisol levels, and that's what you want to avoid. During the follicular phase, you can start pushing yourself a bit harder, like increasing the strength of your workouts, more cardio, like running, spinning, and then starting to lift weights if that's something that you like doing. It all becomes a little easier during this time because you have rising estrogen that's helping you with your pain threshold and also recovery. And your body will definitely get a huge boost and feel super elevated from the additional endorphins during this phase. So yeah, it's definitely a power phase to exercise. And during ovulation, keep enjoying all of these exercises. You can even increase it a bit more. Lots of activity, high impact workouts work really well. And then at your luteal phase, as you get closer to your period, you're probably going to start feeling it as well, that you want to pull out the intensity of your workouts as your energy levels fizzle as well. So slowly taper down and plan for more recovery days if that's what your body's telling you and that it needs. And swap out these high intensity workouts for swimming, hiking, yoga, whatever feels good for you.
And there's actually a really beautiful app called Wild.ai out there, which we'll do another episode with, actually. But they're basically not only measuring your body vitals, but they will help you interpret that, obviously in conjunction with your cycle. And it will tell you today's the day to push hard, to do X. It'll actually tell you based on what you like doing. Today you should be doing this, or today you literally should be doing yoga or do something more relaxed. So we'll look forward to having that one as well. I think Whoop and some other fitness trackers have that feature as well, and some of the other ones like Aura, etc. I know they're thinking about it. I'll give them a gentle nudge.
I know that a lot of companies are finally coming to the realization that they need to include or be more inclusive in terms of giving women more options and different options according to their cycle. So that's really exciting that you have these people on as well.
Cool. Work. What can we do in terms of work?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite topics. I think the biggest, and I know this is, again, easier said than done. Not everyone has this ability to ask for flexibility within their work, but it is such a game changer if you're able to do this. So if you're able to take your cycle phases into account when you, for example, schedule important meetings, presentations, as you were saying earlier, when you schedule the dreaded photo shoot during your ovulatory phase so you can feel good about yourself, being able to structure your work according to your cycle. So how would that look? Follicular and ovulation phase. Obviously, as you can already mention, you're energized, you're more forward thinking, you're daring, you're communicative, creative, and full of energy during your follicular phase and your ovulatory phase. So you should take advantage of that. You make sure that your work is scheduled according to that. And then during your luteal and menstrual phase, it's better not to start, the new projects, don't start creating something because you will be more critical of yourself and others. So it's a much better time to review what you've already been doing or what's already been done. And your critical thinking skills are much higher. So you will find mistakes, for example, more easier, faults in logic. And if you can, it might also help you to work from home during this time and even take a break in between, take an hour of rest. I feel like the nap is underappreciated in our day and age, but I think it can be so helpful if you're feeling low energy, just to give yourself that 20 minutes or 30 minutes of rest in between and just really
I'm a
zone
huge
out
fan.
for a bit.
Yeah, huge
Yeah.
fan. I feel like
And
when I was
then,
in kindergarten, you always had to nap, and it took me 2 hours to fall asleep, or 1 hour 58 to fall asleep. And after 2 hours, that would wake you up, and I hated the nap. And these days, I'm a massive fan.
yeah, I feel the same. It's something that we all hated when we were forced to do it, but now we're like, we're giving more time for doing this. Yes, and during this, the last part, and also last part of your cycle, also during menstruation, it's important to take even better care of yourself generally. As we said, sleep enough, eat really well, align your social activities and workouts with your body's needs. Because when you do this, it might also be easier during this phase to tackle things at work that might feel a bit more difficult and you might not want to do during these phases. So when you have to do that, create these extra buffers and take this extra care of yourself so you can still feel good during that phase. And
And be careful how and when you communicate that. You probably don't want to do it while you're right in the middle of it. I think this is something to figure out your need, have a think about what you would like to change, and then communicate it when you're calm and confident, i.e. when you're around ovulation, basically, not when you're right in the middle of your period. Ideally.
Exactly, because your fuse might be a bit shorter. You'll be more direct, which I think can be really great. It's also a phase when you talk a lot more straight, but if you want to persuade someone, you might want to do that during your ovulation phase rather than during your luteal phase. So yeah, verbalizing these needs is super important. And I think obviously workplaces have to make you feel that you can voice these things. It's not just about you, it's about the workplace itself. It's about management and them being able to accept that this is a huge topic. So it's not just about the individual. If you feel like you can, start telling your colleagues and employer how you would like to structure your work and make the most of your cycle and energy, because it's going to benefit everyone in the long run.
We've got a couple of questions from the community base in number one, and I always love this one. Is it true that women who spend a lot of time together, so family, work, friends, have their cycles in sync?
That's an all-time favorite. My answer to that is, yeah, that would be magical. Unfortunately, the very quick answer is no. Research shows that this is unfortunately not true. But regardless of this, many of us will have experienced overlap because obviously our cycles fluctuate naturally 1 or 2 days. So you will be overlapping with your bestie or with other people at work. This will happen. Obviously, we pay attention to when this happens. So yeah.
Interesting. There's another one. Which products can be used with hormonal contraception to increase the libido and help with water retention?
Help with water retention. Yeah. So that's, again, a bit of a disclaimer because, yeah, need to preface by saying I'm not a doctor and it always depends on what kind of contraception you're taking. So if you have huge issues with water retention, it becomes a really big issue for you. You should definitely speak to a gynecologist about this and discuss the issue that you're encountering, because there might be other ways to help you by switching birth control or doing further checks. But that said, I would also like to explain how birth control works, which will make you understand why you might be experiencing the loss of libido and increase in water retention. So most of contraceptive pills and other hormonal birth control work in the way that they prevent ovulation. So this also means that you don't have a real cycle. The bleeding that you experience when and if you pause the pill, for example, for 7 days to bleed, it's not a real period. So you're just shedding the first layer of your uterine lining, but it's only because the progesterone is dropping when you're on your pill break. And your progesterone levels stay consistently high while you're taking the pill. So it's the hormone that we were talking about that's a bit more sedative and can also decrease our sex drive. And what increases our sex drive is actually ovulation and the estrogen during this time. And in combination with us missing out on ovulation, which works together with testosterone, again, to increase our sex drive, this can also cause the loss of your libido. Same goes for water retention. What can we do about this? Yeah, there's many different causes, but some things that can have a positive effect for water retention are eating foods that are low in salt, potassium, magnesium-rich diets, for example, in bananas, avocados, tomatoes, sweet potato, leafy veggies, and spinach, and protein, but also vitamin B6 and magnesium as supplements can help in this instance. And for the low libido, magnesium is and can be helpful because it's also helping you with balancing progesterone and estrogen as well as the testosterone. But there's also some people that say that ashwagandha can help you, and maca, or red maca, I should say. They've been linked to increasing your sex drive, but also, again, please consult with your doctor to see if ashwagandha might interfere with any other medications that you might be taking, because I know that can happen.
Okay, thank you for that. So we've got a couple of questions around mental health, PMS, mood swings, depression, etc. So what practices do you recommend during, I mean, it's not always PMS, that's just if you have symptoms, for example. So that's actually an interesting one, but basically what happens, what can you do before and during your period, especially if it's not always possible to just work according to your cycle? I think some of these things we touched upon, but
I think it's such an important question because that's the overarching question that most people always have. What do I do with this? So also, again, prefacing that there's a difference between PMS, so premenstrual syndrome, and then there's a condition called PMDD, and that needs treatment that goes a lot further than cycle awareness and syncing. So if you feel that during this week before your period or 2 weeks before your period, you are unable to tackle life issues, it's very difficult for you to, within your relationships and just being in the world, then you should definitely have a doctor look into this for you, because there is other help that you can receive. But for the others, the first step to understanding your mood pre-menstruation is tracking. So find out when exactly the mood swings occur, what you've been doing the days before. So this can be done, for example, in our app. So we help you to track your overall mood, but also habits like sleeping, eating, did you drink enough water? And this will let you gain awareness around what might affect these sensitivities and you might be able to eliminate them. Example for my life, I know that I should not be drinking any alcohol during this phase, because having a hangover and worse sleep, which alcohol does, makes my mood so much worse during this phase, makes me feel absolutely terrible at this point in my life. So yeah, mood swings are often caused by the drop of both estrogen and progesterone, but generally all hormone levels right before our periods. And other people feel the shift. Some people feel the shift right after ovulation at the beginning of the luteal phase, since they react more heavily to the increase of progesterone. And there's no quick fix for every person here. There's not a one solution fits all that I can offer. So there's a lot of trial and error, but there's also having the awareness that it's okay to be sad and angry and vulnerable and a little bit more direct in these moments, as long as we stay fair. That I think is also really important to remember. Like, it's okay for us to have feelings. It's also okay for us to voice them, because I think we sometimes forget, like, we're humans, we're not robots. We're allowed to go through these things. But generally, what can help? Obviously, enough sleep, eating regularly, drinking lots of water, planning for a lot of downtime and rest during these phases. And yeah, of course, everything that I already mentioned also goes for work. So if you have deadlines, presentations, appointments that you cannot move during this week, make sure to create an environment and a schedule that will make it easier for you to get through this work week. So make sure your social calendar isn't overflowing either. And if you can or are able to plan ahead this much, you can also structure your work accordingly.
Just to make sure you don't go completely crazy. Fantastic. So
Yes.
final question. Speaking of work, actually, what is your vision of company culture for the future? So how do you think they will embrace and accommodate the more cyclical nature of half the workforce?
Yeah. So yeah, love this question. And unfortunately not because I have an easy answer for this, but because I find it so important that we speak about this to see what changes are possible right here and now and what still needs to be done. So my and our vision as Hormone is that there is a general understanding of the impact that the hormone cycle has on women and menstruators. So both positively and negatively. And again, we're not weaker for having a more fluctuating hormone cycle. I think that's really important to point out because it's something that we put on ourselves and what society has put on us as women. We have incredible powers because of and during our cycle, but we have not been given the knowledge and the tools to work with them. For me, the first step is awareness and education on a company, but also personal levels, giving the employee the tools to actually work and live with cycle awareness, gaining body literacy, and then also the destigmatization of the topic. So us speaking about this now is exactly that. You need to know how the hormone cycle affects you and how you can harness its power and navigate it. And in an ideal world, we would all be able to 100% work in tune with our cycles, but that's hard to execute. But in almost ideal world, we provide our employees with the second best version of that. So we give them the freedom and the trust to work according to their own cycles whenever possible and give them all the tools to feel better when they're going through a not so pleasant phase. How can an employee start doing that? For example, by always having menstrual products in their office, maybe having a room for everyone who is currently on their period stacked with water bottles or whatever the needs are or the wishes are of the employees that work there. Having a cozy space that's more comfortable to work from during your period, or giving you also the opportunity to work from home and to also do whatever you need to do to feel better during this phase. I think this is the first step in the right direction that we can take.
And hopefully finally education as well, because as I've discovered, so many people just don't even know what's going on. So hopefully spread the hormone out so everyone knows that.
Yes.
Philippa, it was fantastic having you on. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Judith.
Thank you for joining me on this transformative journey. Your presence in this community is truly valued. Now, you may not realize it, but your words hold immense power. They have the ability to reach others who may benefit greatly from the wisdom shared here. If you found value in what you heard, I kindly ask you to take a moment to subscribe to Biohacking Eve, leave a glowing review on your preferred podcast platform, and share Biohacking Eve with your friends and family. Your support helps spread the message of health optimization for women far and wide. Lastly, I want to express my gratitude to you for investing in yourself. By prioritizing your well-being, you serve as an inspiration to others. I'm eagerly looking forward to bringing you many more exciting episodes, and thank you for being a vital part of our community. Live long and prosper, my friends. The Biohacking Eve Health Optimization for Women podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice, and no doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not intended to be substituted for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they may have and should seek the assistance of the healthcare professionals for any such conditions. In addition, the information on this podcast does not constitute investment or financial advice.